are back. I'm your host, Barry Waxler, here with my co-hosts, Andrea Kay and Al Arias. And our next guest is Mr. Stephen Herrick from Tully Rinckey. I should have corrected myself from before. Tully Rinckey PLLC.
Yes, the P is very important, Barry. It stands for professional.
Yeah.
I almost take that as an insinuation, but we won't go there.
No, it's very important that we have the professional in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that
because otherwise people would think you were an unprofessional law firm
or amateur. One of the two.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Tully Rinckey. What do you do? Who do you serve? Tell us a little bit more.
Well, a little bit of the history of Tully Rinckey. Our first office opened up in upstate New York in 2004, and we now have 4 offices in upstate New York. And in 2008, we opened an office in Washington, D.C., and shortly after that in Arlington, Virginia. And our new San Diego office, which opened the day before yesterday, is our 7th office.
Wow.
And our concentration in the San Diego office is going to be on federal labor and employment, military law, and security clearance.
Okay. So federal employment law, you have a busy schedule here with federal employment and military in town.
Yeah, it was very surprising to us when we did the market research to find out that California has the largest number of federal employees of any state in the country, and even larger than the District of Columbia.
Wow.
Our firm has been aggressively growing for the 10 years of its existence, and so when we were looking for a new market, California was an obvious choice. And then we saw, when we did the research, we saw that San Diego was an ideal fit for us, both because of the large number of federal employees and the large number of military, both active, retired, and service disabled.
So that must have been a big challenge for you moving from Albany, New York to San Diego, California.
Yeah, I personally moved from Washington, D.C. To San Diego, but it was no less a challenge. Distance and the time difference has made it a little challenging for us, but we've revised our staffing hours. We now work from 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, which is 5:30 a.m. here, all the way until 5:30 here, which is 8:30 there. So we have a double shift so that we're available at all times for people who are in need of our services.
Interesting. Well, one of the key things that you mentioned before we got on air was your influence with the service-disabled veteran community.
Yes. Our firm is actually a service-disabled veterans-owned firm. It's a certified service-disabled veterans-owned business. Both the named partners, Matthew Tully and Greg Rinckey, are service-disabled veterans, and it's part of the mission of the firm to be able to provide services to service-disabled veterans.
Well, I welcome that because we do a lot of work with disabled veteran nonprofits. Challenged American Disabled Business Persons Association, and I'm finally meeting with Mike Sabellico this afternoon.
Wonderful.
So he's with another disabled veterans nonprofit. So hopefully there's a connection in there.
Very nice to hear that. I would say that a large number of service-disabled veterans do find their way into the federal government workforce, and the challenges that these service-disabled veterans have in transitioning from military service to the civilian side can be significant. And very often there are conflicts and disagreements and disputes and problems, and that's one of the reasons that we do what we do, is to help the transition of the service-disabled veteran from the military sector to the civilian sector and make sure that transition is a smooth one and that they have a reliable civilian career.
What about your connection with the service-disabled vets that are going into self-employment? Is there a connection there as well?
To a certain extent, there is, yes. We do represent private sector companies as well, but most of our business has to do with federal labor and employment and military. And so to that extent, our concentration is really on federal employees in general, veteran federal employees in particular, and service-disabled federal veteran employees in even more particular.
Now, what makes the law different or special for a federal employee as opposed to civilian workforce?
Well, the law is very different between the private sector and the federal sector. Federal sector employees have certain due process rights, which are to which they are entitled by law. And that includes in cases in which they are proposed for adverse action, such as suspension or removal, a right to reply orally and in writing, a right to receive a decision from a disinterested official, and a right to, under certain circumstances, appeal that to a federal agency. And none of those rights exist in the private sector. And so the ability to navigate the labyrinth, if you will, of the due process rights and the rights that are available to federal sector employees is very important, because they are up against agencies who have attorneys on staff. Their job is basically to defend against these claims, and so the federal employees often find themselves overmatched, and that's why it's important to have professional legal assistance to navigate the path through the federal disciplinary proceedings.
I couldn't agree more. I think what you're doing is fabulous. So now, Tully Rinckey is one of the nation's largest federal employment firms. Is that correct?
That is correct on the employee side.
Right.
Okay, we only do our employment work on the employee side. There are a number of firms, obviously very large law firms, that do work in the private sector on the company side, on the corporation side. Obviously, all of the federal agencies have their own attorneys on staff, either through their own agencies or the Department of Justice. We are one of the largest firms in the country that focuses entirely on the representation of employees. And we're now very proud to say that we are a coast-to-coast law firm.
Okay.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to San Diego. We're glad to have you here.
I am personally thrilled to be here.
Great. You're listening to Close Up on San Diego Business here on KFSD AM 1450 and financialnewsandtalk.com. I'm your host, Barry Waxler, here with my co-host, Andrea Kay and Al Arias, and our guest is Mr. Stephen Herrick from Tully Rinckey, the law firm of Tully Rinckey.
I'm curious about who pays. Who, on behalf of the employee, who pays the law firm for the representation?
If the legal action is successful, in other words, if disciplinary action is proposed against an employee and the employee appeals the disciplinary action and is successful in that appeal, then the agency is required to make a payment of reasonable attorney's fees to the client. And many of these cases settle because the process is an arduous one. It's long and it can be expensive. And in any settlement, we will request that the agency reimburse the employee for the attorney's fees any attorney's fees that they have advanced. And in a very large percentage of the cases, I'm pleased to say that we are able to get the agencies to reimburse the clients for those attorney's fees.
That's great. That's great. Sounds like you do a wonderful job for the employee, and especially when you have federal employment and military employment, you find people that aren't as skilled at I don't want to say representing themselves because that's the wrong term, but people that are self-employed know how to represent themselves in many different ways, whereas the employees of the federal government and military aren't as savvy at that. So I think they need this type of thing.
You're absolutely right, Barry, and the procedure is very difficult. There are a lot of hurdles and hoops, and many of these people have jobs that they're trying to keep, and at the same time trying to fight a disciplinary action or discrimination against them, and they don't really have the time to do that. So it's very important, and again, because the agencies all have attorneys who know what they're doing, they're just sitting there waiting for you to come along so that they can contest your claim. It's very important that the federal employee have an attorney to level the playing field with respect to that.
I'm sure it's quite intimidating to be an employee and to have this action against you and to be on your own. And
well, so you're overmatched.
Yeah.
The other side has too many resources.
Absolutely.
I do a lot of the client intakes for the firm with the federal employees, and one of the things that you hear constantly, well, you hear two things. One is, I've done as much as I can, and I just don't know what to do anymore. Mm-hmm. It's number one. Number two is, I can't find a lawyer to help me. This is a discipline that not a lot of law firms have chosen to enter into, and that's one of the reasons we came out to California, was because in doing the consults, I found that a large number of our potential clients come from the West Coast, and they have said, I call and nobody knows what to do. There are attorneys who will tell you that they know what to do. I personally call them dabblers, which I guess is not the most flattering term, but you don't want to get involved in a dabbler. You want to get involved in somebody who's been there before. And I think another advantage that our firm has is that we've been in this business now since 2008 in a very big way, actually even since 2006. And the agencies that are involved know who we are now. And at this point, even a communication with our letterhead on it, does level the playing field. The agency knows that they really can't get away with the types of shenanigans that they would otherwise try to pull.
So Barry, if you see a letter coming to you on a certain letterhead, regarding moi. Okay, heads up. Okay. Now, yeah, I think there's a lot of perception on the part of the American people that whether they're union or whether they're civil service, that they have so many protections that they can't be fired, that they just don't really ever need representation. But that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. There is actually more and more and more of trying to pare down the workforce, correct?
That's absolutely true, Andrea. And I will say that, and I guess maybe this is my expression of a personal opinion, but I think it's a tough gig to be a federal employee these days. Mm-hmm. All of the agencies are under tremendous financial pressure, budgetary pressure, and it's the easiest thing to do to reduce your budget is to reduce payroll. And so what we're seeing these days is a lot of cases in which conduct which would previously have been considered a no harm, no foul situation. The agency will tell the employee, don't do that again. You didn't follow my instructions. You didn't do this the right way. Don't do it again. They're now being proposed for removal. And that is a double benefit for the agency because they get rid of the employee and they have a budgetary advantage as well. And that we're seeing all across the board now, government-wide, every agency from A to Z. And that's why it's particularly important now, for federal employees to know that they have an option out there to help them, defend against, actions that may be taken against them. Yeah. Also, one thing I would like to also throw in is that we also do equal employment opportunity cases, cases of discrimination where employees have been discriminated against on the basis of race, color, ethnic origin. Disability is a very big one. A lot of disabled employees, especially service-disabled employees, are the victims of discrimination based upon their disabled status. They require reasonable accommodation. The agency is not always willing to give them reasonable accommodation, and that results in their inability to do their job most effectively, which snowballs into a situation in which they're proposed for removal because they're no longer efficient. And in that kind of situation, again, we would step in and level the playing field and try to make sure that what's supposed to happen happens, which is that the employee gets the rights they're entitled to by law.
Great. Well, before we run out of time, we do need you to tell our listeners how they get in touch with you.
Sure. We have a very well-developed website, www.tullylegal.com. There are links on that site to all of our practice areas. All of our attorneys have biographies, and we have a large number of articles, both print, television, and radio appearances that can be linked to. And we have a stellar marketing department, which does a very good job of letting everybody know what it is that we do.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. Want to hear more? I definitely want to hear more offline about your jeans and sneakers initiative. So you have a nonprofit set up?
Yes, we do. There's a little box in every one of our offices. And you can dress down on Fridays. And if you wear jeans and sneakers, you have to make a contribution to a designated charity. And at the end of the month, that money is turned over to the charity.
That's a fabulous idea.
That is a great idea.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to spread that idea out, and I'll give you the credit for it.
Okay, thank you. Great. And I'll waive the royalties on it.
Yeah. Can we get that in writing, Counselor?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, last quick question: how many more offices are y'all going to open up?
Well, I would be surprised if there weren't 2 or 3 more offices within the next 2 or 3 year period. We're looking at large cities on the East Coast, and maybe 1 or 2 more offices in upstate New York. We find that there is a significant need for the services that we render, and people who just can't find what they need in the locations that they're at.
Well, there's a significant need, and there's a significant value that goes with it.
Yep,
so I appreciate you being here with us and telling us about it.
I thank you for inviting me.
Great. You're listening to Close Up on San Diego Business, where we get up close and personal with homegrown San Diego businesses and the people that are working hard to make a difference in our community. This is financialnewsandtalk.com. I'm your host, Barry Waxler. We'll be right back after the break with more homegrown business close-up, and we will have with us Mr. Larry Alva from Pacific Beach Fish Shop.